Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This will be a series of video which focus on the flight planning in more details. In this video series, we will be discussing about the VFR, IFR, the terms and tools required in preparing the flight plan. The IFR is Instrument Flight Rules, which relies mainly using instrument on board the aircraft and external system to help provide guidelines to navigate your aircraft. In contrast, VFR is another form of flight rules, which is visual flight rules, where we navigate the aircraft using mainly visual cues, including the earth counter, unique building features, or any other geographical cues. That's why the VFR requirements are especially good visibility and good weather conditions, and in most cases, recognizable visual cues available. IFR should be applied when visual reference is not available, either due to poor visibility like at night and bad weather condition, or lack of visual cues like in the middle of the ocean or desert. IFR also mandatory for flight above 18,000 feet in United States. That's why most airlines are using IFR in their flight. IFR technique involve complex and require in-depth study. I won't go too deep into real-life rules and regulations and techniques, but mainly focus on general concept, terms and tools required to do IFR flight plan in the simulation, especially in FS2020. And I will be using the IFR flight example, specifically using A320neo Airbus, where I have more experience in flying it until today. But a similar concept might work in other aircraft or smaller aircraft with kind of a glass cockpit, for example. Of course, with different method of interaction with the onboard instruments. This video series also not going to cover all aspects of the IFR or detailed flight planning in respect to real-life requirements. So don't use it in real life, okay? Just for simulations. But it should be sufficient for you to do basic flight planning, especially in FS2020, specifically for Airbus A320neo, of course. So in this video, we are going to start from the easiest options, as it will be using the built-in tools inside FS2020 inside the world map itself. So let's do it. Of course, if you just want to have a quick flight with no fuss, you could opt not to do any planning. Just choose your aircraft, for example, like this small one, and just starting anywhere you want. Like here, for example, you just click here and set as departure. Okay, and you probably end up in the middle of the air, like 5,000 feet above the air, like airborne, 5,000 feet, right? And then click fly. That's it. You just need to do that to enjoy FS2020. However, if you want to do more realistic flight, then you might want to do at least basic point-to-point flight plan or a complex IFR flight plan with departure, arrival, and approach route. As you can see here, you could find several options. First, Vfr Direct GPS, of course. So if you can see here, you can, let's say you want to start from where? JFK, for example, right? So you can set this as departure and then select the destinations. And there are VFR Direct GPS here. You could just fly direct from point to point, or you can do it from airport to airport, like what I've just did right now. For example, if you want to do a point to point, you can do something like here, set as departure, and then somewhere else here, for example, set as arrival. So you have some random location to go to, or you could get from Google, for example. Let me take Google Map or Bing or whatever it is. So here, Google Map, you want to, let's say, Mount Rushmore. I've tried to look for it here. And you could click right and copy this. Just click here, copy to clipboard, and going back to FS2020, you paste it here, Control V, there you go, and go over there. So that is a Mount Rushmore. So you can set this as a rifle, and you can, let's say, start from here, for example, set as departure. So you go from somewhere else in at 5,000 feet, and then you go to Mount Rushmore here as your custom rifle. Okay, so that is how you do a simple point-to-point kind of flight plan. You can add also another waypoint. For example, if you want to go from here to another point, for example, to this, you can click also from the available point of interest, like this one. You can click add, and you can also click here, add, here, add. You have like 4 points, or even you can click here, add, as many as you want to. So you can click here, add. The only difference is that the one you set as a rifle will be at the end of the flight. The one that you set as departure will be the first point of the flight. So you have to decide yourself. So, for example, you want to depart from one airport to this airport again. Let's say do this as departure, and then set this again as a rifle. So it will be both depart from Kilo Charlie Papa Romeo to Kilo Charlie Papa Romeo, but then you had to add this one as the waypoint, add again waypoint, and then here add again waypoint, as many as you want. So you can create a complex flight plan using point of interest, or even like this one, an airport, you can click as the waypoint. So you can also add another waypoints from here. It's called nav aids and fix and RNAV positions. So here there will be a lot more points to use as your waypoint. Okay, so that is the manual process that you can create to create a flight plan, a random flight plan, as much as you want or in any way you want. Okay, the next option is using VOR. So if we, let's say, go from Orlando, okay, and then we go to, let's say, where, Miami, right? So here we go, Orlando to Miami. You can then opt to VOR. So what happened is that from Orlando you fly to this VOR and this TRV and PHK or Pahokee, and then to Miami VOR. DHB VOR, and then you are directed to Miami airport. Okay, so what is VOR? Okay, VOR or VHF, omnidirectional range, or very high frequency omnidirectional range, is a type of short-range radio station or beacon transmitting at specific frequency in VHF or very high frequency with bearing information in it. This is an old technology used in US since 1930, and provide point-to-point route to navigate before the invention of GPS, or it called GNSS now. This is the symbol on the right side. It is a symbol of VOR, and some VOR equipped with DME, or distance measuring equipment, which provide additional information about your aircraft distance in relation to the specific VOR. This is the symbol of VOR DME on the bottom right. By charting a plot between known VOR, so here, for example, from this one, TRV VOR, okay, this is a similar symbol, and into the PHK VOR here, okay, this is the PHK VOR. Now we can travel between those VOR from and to our destinations. Here we select which VOR use as a reference for our flight, as we are in VFR flying using VOR. So it's still VFR here. If you can see on the top left, it's still called VFR, meaning that mainly VFR, but you have a VOR set in your equipment as a guideline, so you can take a look at your radio navigation systems or autopilot systems in case you kind of disoriented or you want to know where you want to go. You can also later on find this route in your VFR map inside FS2020 once you set up. But it's kind of cheating, of course, but this is the old way of doing a point-to-point navigation in the old days. So you have to tune into the frequency, and you can find out what your aircraft bearing in relation to the VOR locations. So then you can determine the directions toward a certain VOR. Okay, now before we go further into kind of more complex IFR flight planning, beside VOR, there is another type of radio navigational equipment. One of it called NDB. Okay, NDB is a non-directional beacon. It's also a radio transmitter. However, the signal transmitted does not include inherent directional information. Compare with VOR, for example. VOR have a bearing information about your aircraft locations toward the VOR. Basically, your aircraft can determine the angle or the bearing versus the VOR location, but NDB cannot do that. So you just need to find out and put a compass set into the kind of beacon location. NDB also used in naval navigations, like in the ocean. So because it's kind of transmitted, they're using a lower frequency transmitter, so the signals can follow the curvature of the Earth, so it can travel longer versus VOR. So that is the major advantage of NDB versus VOR. And the NDB can also provide DME, or distance measuring equipment, similar with VOR. This is on the right side, the symbol of the NDB. I don't know if I can find it here. So this one is the NDB usually. That's yeah. So if you can see here, there's no type here. RNAV, which one? Let me see. Yeah, I need to find out. So this one is definitely VOR. So here, localizer. The name is localizer, DME. So with DME, so with the box, usually mostly with the box here. So DME, VOR DME. So localizer. Sorry, localizer is different one. It's for ILS. This one is VOR DME. So let me. So you can see here on the right side, there's a box explaining the type of the radio stations. So this one is RNAV. So we're gonna discuss RNAV later on. So this one, yeah, it's not. This one. See, so that is NDB. So if you can, that's quite rare NDB in US. VOR is much more common in US, while in other countries, you can find NDB. Probably much more frequent because it's a lower cost of installations. However, this day, both of them, both NDB, VOR, are slowly replaced with other systems. With the increasingly availability of accurate satellite navigation or SatNav, now called GNSS system, it becoming more commonly used as the form of navigation. For GNSS system can utilize many available satellite such as GPS from US, GLONASS from Russia, Galileo from Europe, Beidou from China, India, and Japan also have their own. So with GNSS, it provides redundancy if one satellite system is not available to be used for navigations. With SatNav or GNSS satellite navigation, it provides autonomous geospatial positioning, where it allows electronic receivers to determine their locations, like coordinate, the longitude, latitude, and also altitude and elevations on and from the Earth in high precisions within a few feet. Using time signals transmitted from the satellite, thus no longer required radio station on Earth like VOR and NDB. And more aircraft today has been equipped with GNSS while keeping the VOR and DB navigation as a backup or for specific requirement. For example, near the airport, where it calls localizers. Or VOR with DME still provide a more consistent, accurate location-based navigation versus satellite. You can get some possible disturbance from the cloud or some weather disturbance. Okay. And most of modern glass cockpit aircraft in FS2020 have built-in GNSS capability for area navigation, which we call it RNAV GPS mode. Okay, so RNAV can use VOR set up by certain way of doing it. So you can do a lateral navigation and vertical navigation together. Form RNAV, ground-based RNAV we call it, and then GPS RNAV, so or satellite navigation based RNAV. So yeah, RNAV is area navigation. So you don't have to do a point to point like from this VOR to VOR. You can just do wherever you want waypoints and basically using a standalone or dedicated coordinates. Okay. It's quite confusing probably for you, but just bear with me, okay? With GNSS system, the aircraft can follow an airways or specific route, which use VOR, which is usually you have to use VOR or NDB to navigate. But once you use GNSS, you don't need to reference into any VOR. So you can follow this path that use VOR, but you don't need the VOR itself. The path will be navigated by the satellite. Okay, so that is basically using GNSS. This is the symbol of intersections where a line with different bearing from the center of the two different VOR create a virtual intersection point as a reference for flight destination. We call it waypoints. By the way, VOR and NDB can be used also as a waypoint themselves. That's why VOR to VOR flight planning exists. These are the symbol of a waypoint using RNAV GPS in blue. So sometimes it's differentiated in the chart. So if you see there's a waypoint here, let's find the waypoint. Yep, it's like this one. This is RNAV waypoints, and this one Igor's is fixed, or is actually ground-based waypoint, meaning that it forms by a certain triangulation from two VOR, for example. This one also a fixed or a triangulated ground-based waypoint, while this one Wiener, for example, basically is RNAV, GPS RNAV. So basically it doesn't require triangulation, just a coordinate which is already set in your system. So that's how you differentiate the waypoints, a ground-based waypoint. So sorry, I disrupt this. You cannot see this box RNAV, and then this one, the triangle one, is fixed. A fix is a triangulated ground-based RNAV. Okay, or waypoint. Sorry. That is waypoints, and I think once you get used to use it, and then you get more understanding about the waypoints as a destination for your flight. Waypoints are named with 5-letter name usually, like there, Jupam, Jupim, I think, Cleve, Igor, WPBI, Diaper, Eura, and Sokpo. So those are the names of waypoints, and that you can find in a chart or in FS2020, of course, in the flight plan. There is another terminology used in real life IFR planning, which is airway. Not airways, but airway. However, inside FS2020, you could not see any airway here in the world map. Airway is like a highway for a car connecting one waypoint to another waypoint. Based on FAA in US, there are Victor or V and Tango or T airway for low altitude IFR routes, and Jet or G or Quebec or Q are airway for high altitude IFR routes. V and J or Victor and Jet is using VOR or ground-based triangulated waypoints, and the triangle one, remember? While as the entry and exit point of an airway, while the T or Tango and Quebec using RNAV, GPS, or GNSS-based waypoints as their entry and exit waypoints to create airway. Airway usually named with initial one or more letter, either V, the T, the G, or Q, then followed by one or more letters and one or more numbers. If you see here in IFR chart using Navigraph, so you can see here there are this is the low en route airway. So there's a V17 here, V140, V272. This is Victor. Sometimes they merge between V and T if they kind of like being formed by two waypoints, one using the VOR base or ground based waypoints, and the other one formed by RNAV GPS waypoint. For example, here you might not be able to find it, but there's a lot of V here. This is for the low route or the low end route airway, and if you click high end route, they're gonna change to G or Jet 18, Jet 6, Jet 231, coming from a specific waypoint here to another waypoint here. So for example, this is the VOR waypoint to VOR waypoint connected by airway of J18 here. Okay, so there's another one like I think this is a triangulated waypoint or the ground-based waypoint Tanier, connecting the VOR here, VOR as a waypoint here, Albuquerque, I think. Yes, this is Albuquerque International Sunport. This is actually an airport. VOR connecting to the waypoint Tanier with the Jet 15 airway. Okay, so airway is a specific route connecting one waypoint to another waypoint. As you recall, waypoint can be formed by VOR itself or by triangulated waypoints. So two VOR create a waypoint in the middle, or by RNAV GPS. Okay, so it's just a coordinate. Okay. Now, after knowing the terms, let us move to the IFR flight planning itself. In the IFR flight planning, we divide into several segments from departure, route, cruise level or en route, arrival route, and finally the approach route before landing. So after takeoff, you take a departure route, and then once you level off, you take a cruise or en route, the one that is usually stay the same altitude for some period of time until you are arriving at the arrival route. Before then, you enter an approach route toward the runway that you would like to land. Okay, the movement within each departure and arrival airport is not part of the flight plan though, but you can do it here in FS2020. Yeah, but it's a different kind of rules, I guess. Mostly required ATC clearance, but in simulator definitely you can do it from wherever you want, right, without anybody scolding you or mad at you. You can select which gate or ramp you parked, and then taxi to the runway that you would like to use, and then take off. Or on arrival, you probably want to choose the runway that you want to land, and then which gate or ramp that you would like to park to. Okay, so here is one example of the flight segment or flight phase from departure, cruise or en route, arrival, and approach. So you can see here we are traveling from Key West or Las Vegas McCarran International Airport, runway 26, right? Or you can select from the gate. Basically, if you make it detailed, there's a yellow line here, and there's an aircraft here actually following the route. And this is yellow one is called we call it the departure route. Okay, it called SID, Standard Instrument Departure. okay, because they follow a certain specific route using waypoint here. So there is a, here we can click is RNAV waypoint. This one is fixed or ground-based waypoint, and you can see here 2 aircraft actually following the, this is live traffic, so 2 aircraft is following the same route here, which I drawn because this is standard instrument departure, so it's a published route, so everyone knows or can access or can use this route anytime they want, and of course with clearance from it, air traffic controller. So that is departure route. So once you exit departure route, so this ziny waypoint is the transition from departure route into en route, or your basically your point to point or direct route to toward your destinations. But before reaching your destination, you might want also to use a star, which is standard terminal arrival route. So this one is the green one after the cyan color here, and then enter the green one here. This is already a star toward your destination airport, which is KPHA or Kilo Papa Hotel X-Ray or Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. So this one is our destinations airport, for example, here, sorry, toward the airport. You have to follow this star, a defined route for arriving into Phoenix. Okay, so you cannot just direct to Phoenix because it's dangerous, right? Like this one, there's a lot of, you see there's a lot of traffic here, like many aircraft actually trying to land, trying to merge, trying to depart, trying to land and take off at the same time. I don't know. So it's very dangerous if you don't take a published route accordingly in real life. Okay, so that's why the star exists, and the purple one is actually the approach route. So to land into runway 26 with ILS, you have to go this purple route to reach to within the direction of the runway itself. So if not, then if you see, if you're arriving here, it will be very difficult to maneuver, right? For small plane, yes, you could do that. For jet airliners, it's going to be very difficult. So you have to follow this route, the purple one, and then capture the ILS glide slope and land here. Okay, so that is a sample of an IFR using, we call it SID, and a star and approach route. SID and star define a specific route to be used to depart from an airport. Okay, that's the definitions, to a transition waypoint. So from the airport to a transition point, which is here is ziny. It can be many transition point. If you go to some other direction, there is another what do you call it? There's another SID available. SID to here, SID to there, to north, east, westbound traffic. So this one is to south east bound SID, because we want to go to Phoenix over here. And this is also for the star, which is the star is also for arriving to the airport. They have many star, so there is a route toward the airport. Okay. The star itself can be from northbound, southbound, westbound, eastbound. Basically, there's a lot of star route available. I think it's required to govern, as mentioned, so the traffic is not becoming chaotic. As you see, there's a lot of aircraft going in and out, leaving or coming to the airport airspace, so they have to regulate it into a specific route so they can control it. So at least they know where they are after a certain specific time. I think SID and star provide a specific route going from or to several different directions. As I mentioned, it can be west, east, north, southbound, southeast, northwest, or flight direction. in here in FS2020, we can do our flight plan with SID and Star, which provide the most efficient route to where we would like to go. However, sometimes ATC can override it and give us a assigned route based on availability due to traffic, for example, or other reasons. So, but it's quite rare in simulator. In real life, yes, it could be something like that. SID and Star in IFR flight plan required to be followed, especially in dangerous airport location where there could be like mountains or man-made obstacle around the airport. During our flight, the SID and Star will provide the safest route for you. So sometimes if you don't use a route, like I've tried once flying A320 without like SID, departing from Denver, for example, Colorado. When I turned my aircraft right, I was actually heading into a mountain without knowing the terrain and the condition around the airport. It would be quite dangerous. With the SID, at least it give you the safest route with certain specific minimum, let's say, altitude to be achieved. If you see in the second screen, I show you in Navigraph as a reference. Of course, today is mainly focusing on FS2020, but just for reference, unfortunately in FS2020 it cannot show the option of the route. So here is, you see the same similar route like here, right? So if you can see the same form of route like in FS2020, let me delete this one. But here you can click this one. Let's say for departure, this pink one, we can expand this one into like this, like a spider web, right? So that is amazing. So you can see which option of the route that goes toward your destination. Let's say you want to go across the United States to the east, so you can either choose NITZ, NITZ1, Git GT1, Rat Pick 1, Lola 1 for going northwest, or Joker 1 northwest, also Radier 1 going to southwest direction, southwest bound kind of flight. So you can select which route that you would like to go. So like the one that we select for going from McCarran to Phoenix is a Wrestler 1 here. So you can see Wrestler 1. If we select this Wrestler 1, so you can see option here, and you can show the waypoint here. So from Wrestler 1, from Flar, Rudy, Jadwi, Wrestler, Rochek, and Zaini. So here is the waypoint for Wrestler 1 SID, or standard instrument departure. If you change, for example, you want to go here, you can select this NITZ 1, and you can also show the waypoint here available for it. So you can exit here. You can exit here if you want to, or you can exit here if you want to. You don't have to up to the end of the waypoint, so the route or the SID itself, but you can exit or transition out in specific waypoint. So you, for this NITZ, you can transition out of NITZ itself. So you can see all transition here, or just NITZ transition, or HOSI transition. So it's only HOSI transition that is shown, but the rest is hidden. So you hear the transition to HOSI, or you can transition from NITZ itself. So after NITZ, then you are using a direct route rather than using the SID. So that that is the beauty of Navigraph. For example, if you go here in FS2020, you're using departure Rustler 1. So by the way, FS2020 is using AROC. So I'll explain AROC. It's actually the standard navigation aids documentations updated to the latest one, right? FS2020. So if you use a chart or documents lesser than the FS2020, I think AROC 2105, let's say you use 2003 AROC, it might not give you the same name on the SID or star. Sometimes it's just outdated and they're no longer used. So just be careful on, or just be aware of it. Don't get frustrated that why can't you find Rustler 1, for example, because in AROC 2003 there's no Rustler 1, probably different name. Okay, Rustler 1 means that it's already updated once, I guess. There's a revision number behind the Rustler. Okay, so here you cannot see the option, right? So what happened is that you just need to try an error. Okay, so here, oh, that's not good, right? So NITC, as remember NITC, the one, I think it's going to be eastbound. So it's going east and going back to the west again. So that's not really nice. This one, McCarran, that's okay. It's a short one. It's only like one stop and that's it. Probably this is okay. Lola, remember the one that goes to the west, but this one is probably not proper because we're going west. We want to go southeast, but this is going northwest. Joker also going northwest. And some other things for runway 26 right. Okay, so for departure of runway, so they have departure runway, different runway. So Lola from runway 19R, or even we want to go Rustler, not Rustler 26, but come on, let's say we are not going from Rustler to 6, but Rustler something. So the Rustler also can have several. You see Rustler 01L, for example. So they're going toward the runway 1 rather than here runway 1, going up north and going east. So that is another option on Rustler depending on the runway. Okay, so unfortunately it's not quite intuitive in FS2020. You cannot see the option, so you have to kind of guess on from which runway you depart or take off, and then which SID and which SID transition that you would like to choose. So here it ends Zaini, it ends on Wotro, not Zaini, so it ends on Wotro. Okay, and directly to the approach, to the arrival or the star segments. Similarly, the star you cannot choose, but here in you can see here in Navigraph, if we select this green one, it is the brusher, right? Brusher are selected, show waypoint here, and this is the waypoint for the star that we select. You can also see available star, but not many here, only like there's a lot of, there's a web of star that you can choose from, mostly from the west, from the northeast, southeast, and the north itself, from desert, bunter, pink, hider, and many more. Okay, JC here, eagles, and you can choose which kind of star, standard terminal arrival routes that you would like to choose. Here we choose browser 1 with transition from Wotro here. Okay, so that is Star in the IFR flight planning for arriving toward the airport. But once you reach the airport, you need to get the, what do you call it, the approach route. So here the approach towards certain runway using ILS or RNAV approach. RNAV using is GPS approach. And then you can also select several ILS available. So here is for runway 26, there is several options from the, especially from the east. So for runway 7 right, you have several more options here, and runway 08 for several other options, and many more. So here in Navigraph you can see it clearly, but here in FS2020 you have to just imagine this is the ILS approach. Let's say you want to change from ILS to 5L, for example. Oh, come on. Or ILS 8, for example. Then it changes the direction of the star toward the end. This is the transition point here for the ILS approach. Okay, I think it's done starting from Sarti here. Sarti here. Sarti. Okay, so that is the Sarti. Browser is the end of the star, and Sarti is the entry point for the approach route. Okay, so it approached from here toward the east, landing on ILS based on ILS 08. Okay, so that is the, we have shown you the several terms here, the SID, the star, and the approach, and there's other terminology for you that is quite new for sim. I just mentioned right now is the RNAV and ILS approach. RNAV approach is basically approach toward runway using GNSS or GPS based technology for lateral navigation, meaning azimuth, for horizontal navigation. But they use the vertical navigation using onboard altimeters like barometric or radar altimeters to provide vertical navigation, or VNAV, to guide the aircraft toward the runway. Okay, so there's an autopilot that can guide your aircraft, or you can, there's a flight path indicator in the instrument that you have to follow. That is horizontally they can guide you, and also vertically they can guide you. So unfortunately for RNAV, this usually if using onboard altimeter is not accurate, right? That's why it's called non-precision approach. Of course, there are new solution RNAV for RNAV GPS based that is really more accurate actually compared to ILS. But today, ILS still much more accurate. For ILS, there's a symbol if you find in the chart. This is a symbol of the ILS, right? So it's an instrument landing system. ILS is instrument landing systems. So ILS use much more accurate base, like a cone shape radio signals, which provide lateral and vertical guide during approach toward the runway. So I haven't got any picture here, but you can find in the internet. So there's a cone of signals toward the runway, and your aircraft basically are guided inside the cone. If you moving out of the cone, or moving down, up, out, or moving up, out, or left, and stray away from the cone, there's an indicator inside your instrument that shows that you are off track, right? So you can try to maintain within the cone, or actually if you're using autopilot like in A320neo or B737, for example, or Boeing aircraft, it's similarly you can follow, or your aircraft can follow the cone inside the cone, so to maintain inside the cone with certain glide path. Okay, basically that is ILS to help you land into an airport. Okay. The other approach is we have discussed RNAV approach using GPS RNAV to navigate lateral horizontally, also vertically using onboard altimeter. We have discussed ILS approach using an instrument like a localizer that and creating a cone of signals that your aircraft try to maintain inside the cone. But there's another approach which is actually VOR approach. In IFR approach, there is a VOR approach. VOR approach is basically just guiding the plane or the aircraft laterally without any vertical navigation. So if you are using VOR approach into an airport, you are left with certain altitude where you have to guide your aircraft manually toward the runway without any radio signal or any support from the landing systems. Okay, so it's a really manual approach, usually like similar with the VFR approach. So you have to see the runway, or you can see the PAPI light. There's a red and white four lights near the runway that can show red or white light. So if there's more white lights, meaning that you are above the glide path, the ideal glide path, but more red lights coming up, meaning that you are below the glide path, the ideal glide path. So you try to be too red, too white, all along the routes that you are going into the runway. So try to maintain too red, too white light all the time on the PAPI light. So PAPI light will help you visually, but during heavy or bad weather conditions, or during the nights, or if PAPI light is not available, then the only way to land in that time is you have to do instrument flight rules, which is either RNAV GPS at least, or ILS approach. Okay, so that is the rule. Lateral navigation, as I mentioned, is referring to azimuth navigations, meaning that you will have to be able to navigate horizontally, right? Longitude so that is longitude or latitude coordinate that from one point to another point. Okay, going north, going east, west, or horizontal navigation. That is ALNAV, or lateral navigation. VNAV is referring to vertical navigations in the air in the form of altitude from the sea or ground level using internal altimeters, either barometric or radar based altimeter, or using satellite to measure your altitude. Some approach thus can be found using ILS approach as the most accurate approach, VNAV ALNAV combination, of course, and RNAV and VOR as the approach without vertical guide. So there's at least several mode of approach, and usually it's shown in the approach plate. We're gonna discuss that approach plate later on, but in this case we are not doing that because we are using FS2020 only. Why it's important? Because those approach will create a different minimum decision altitude or decision altitude, MDA or DA, meaning that if you below MDA or DA, if you cannot see the runway, you have to go around, or you have to go to alternate runway airport, for example, because you cannot land if below that MDA you cannot see the runway, either the guiding light is not up, or during bad visibility like night or bad weather. Okay, so MDADA is very important. That's defined by the tools that you are using for the approach. Later we're gonna discuss that during the advanced planning, like using Navigraph or some other tools. Okay, one last thing before we continue, we mentioned about AROC before. AROC is Aeronautical Information Regulation and Control. Basically, it's a body that produce updated information about airspace structures, like those airway changes, if they change the name or adding one or deleting one, or and revise route, for example, navigation aids, if they change also the VOR, the NDB, or waypoints, the name changes, for example, they do produce the documents, or also the SID and star. That's why some SID and star are no longer available, so it's gone basically, so you cannot reuse that anymore. So you have to use the latest AROC, unfortunately, to be able to plan, realistically. Of course, if you don't want to do it, some AROC, some SID stars still stay the same. Some routes is still there, but some others is not. So unfortunately, FS2020 using updated AROC 2105 during this video is created, but in SimBrief, for example, there's another tools for flight plan. If you use AROC 2003 in SimBrief, some SID and star will not match. I've experienced that. It's quite frustrating. So you cannot find the SID and star that you want to use. Okay. So that is basically what you need to know at this moment about the terminology. We discussed about the nav aids or navigation aids systems like VOR, NDB, VOR, DME. We talk about waypoints. But there's several waypoints. The triangle one is a waypoint space. Ground-based ground-based triangulated waypoints. There's the star one is actually GNSS or GPS-based RNAV waypoints. We talk about the IFR flight plan consists of the SID or standard instrument departures, the en route direct to waypoint to waypoint, direct route. What it means is direct route from one waypoint to waypoints toward your destination. And before entering the airport airspace, you have to use a star or standard terminal arrival routes. Okay, the green one here, for example, and then the final route is the approach route, where it will direct you. The route will direct you to align with the runway that you want to land. So that at least four routes that you're gonna use in IFR planning, beside the taxi and the gate from where you want to go or to land to. Okay, so enough talking. So that is the IFR terms and terminology. There's a lot of to digest, so you can go back again and trying to understand many of the terms. Okay, so let's do a simple IFR planning here. I'm using Airbus here. As I mentioned, let's reset again. So what you can do is basically you define the airport from McCarran into HB. H6 Phoenix. So you see it's just resulted in a direct route VFR Direct GPS. This is not IFR, mostly because this is VFR. So there's two options in IFR, a low altitude and high altitude. Low altitude airways is up from ground level to 18,000 feet, while the high altitude airways is 18,000 feet above. So yeah, so for smaller aircraft, you mostly doing a low altitude airways, but for airlines, you mostly doing high altitude airways, because if you use high altitude airways, you can go to high speed, like beyond 250 knots, but below like say 10,000 feet, you are limited to 250 knots, right? And there's a certain kind of like limitation also in the low altitude airways. But well, sometimes for a short flight, you can use still low altitude airways, like up to 15,000 feet or 18,000 feet, something like that. But mostly like 20,000 feet is much more common. Above 20,000 feet above, it's quite common for airliners also to use in short range, like for CRJ, for example. Well, but again, sometimes if you can go beyond 30,000, that is much more because the higher you go, the more efficient your aircraft will fly, because less restriction in higher altitude versus lower altitude. In lower altitude, there's a lot of restrictions based on the air being moved against your aircraft, right? So it's consume more fuel versus if you go high altitude. So that's why most airliners choose to go higher versus lower. Okay, so here, for example, you can select, let's say, zoom to details. Then you select first the gate. For example, I want to start from this gate, set as departures. And then you go for Phoenix. As I mentioned, I know it's going to be Rustler 1. Usually it's the much more common route. So because let's say Rustler 1, you can choose either from runway 1 L left, or Rustler 1 from 08 left, or 19 left, or 1919 right, whatever. So let's say Rustler 1 from 01 left, as I've done before. So it will give you this yellow SID, or standard instrument departure, for the departure route, and then we transition from Ziny out to direct route. Okay, so now before enter Phoenix, we want to set first the approach rather than the arrival, because we want to select the runway that we want to land. For example, we prefer runway, let's say 27 left using ILS, so we select this approach first. So it's coming from the west to the east. So this is the, let's say, if you see here, it's runway 7 here that we want to land. Okay, so it is using ILS approach, more accurate for airline, for especially, and then that's then you can select the arrival. Here we know, I think last one is brusher 1 07 left, right? So let's say brusher 01 left. So I think it gives something like this. So it's quite common. So it's okay. So it's well, you can try other approach. If Arlin, for example. Nah, that's too far, because it's becoming a longer flight, right? Pinning, yeah, it's like going beyond and then trace back. Jesse, nah. Hyder, nah. Eagle, nah, no. Okay, so you know it's browser 1, sorry, not 0, right, but browser 7 left. Okay, so this one, as defined in, let's say, in SimBrief or in Navigraph, is the best route star for arriving into Phoenix. Okay, so then you from here you enter transition at Avona here. From Avona, you enter the approach route here, the purple one, toward the ILS. I think we can see there is, I think, the approach route that is somewhere in here. You have to see the approach plate, like a chart showing the approach, which where you have to be able to capture the ILS. Okay, but at this moment, you can see here, this is actually in here in Caxi or Avona here. Avona or Caxi is the one where it catches the ILS. But here there's some discrepancy from 7,000 to 4,000. Not good. So I think you have to descend quicker to reach 4,000 to Caxi. Caxi here is the where you lock the localizer, the ILS, laterally or left and right, west and like with west and east, south, north and south. I mean the horizontal navigation, you lock it here, but the approach, the vertical navigation, I think you lock in Foley here. So you have to lock the glide path here or here, Singa. I think one of it. I think Singa, yeah, probably Singa is the one that you can lock the vertical navigation before descending to 1,000, below 1,000 feet and land. Okay, so that is the star and approach leg or route, and this one is the from Wotro here to here is the cruise level or the en route, so in between, so direct route to direct waypoint to waypoint route, and here is the SID route until Zaini here. From Zaini is our transition into direct route to Wotro and to Winner, and then entering the star, I think in DRK here, Drake or Meyer here. Oh, sorry, Brasser. You enter the star at the end of Brasser. I don't know. I think this one is already like the star. Okay, so I think if you can see here, the star start from Wotro, actually. Transition from Wotro to Weiner and Drake and Meyer, etc., etc. So that is the star. Okay, so that is the example of the creating a IFR flight plan using high altitude airways. You can try low altitude also, but it will give you a different kind of yeah, probably the same, but you can see the altitude change to 5,000. Before, if you're using high altitude, you will be given almost like 39,000 feet. So this is for airliners, but for a smaller plane, you probably can choose this low altitude airways, like using Cessna, for example. Then you can use this low altitude airways. Okay. So that's it. So that is the example. And once you're happy with it and you change the time and date here, sorry, the timing and the flight conditions, you want like live weather here, and that's it. And you can click fly, and we continue the flight planning on board the aircraft. So this is the flight plan created inside FS2020. In later video, we're going to focus in a shorter video, of course, because we don't have to explain the terminology. We're going to do a flight plan using Navigraph, use a SimBrief and Navigraph and SimBrief Pilot to ATC, for example. That is much more advanced kind of flight planning, but much more intuitive or easier to understand versus the inbuilt one. But again, with the inbuilt one, I guess it's much easier to understand, and yeah, and I think the simulator engine already recognized the flight plan. If you import it from the third party, sometimes it doesn't show which one is the SID, which one is the star, just direct route, waypoint to waypoint. If you, let's say, for example, if you create it in Pilot 280C, the flight plan, it is a very good tool over there. But when you import it here and you load here, for example, you load the flight plan here or import it here, it will lose the star and SID identification. So it's just becoming direct waypoint to waypoint. But if you're using Navigraph, it will retain the informations, the SID, the star, and the direct route. So I don't know how Navigraph did it versus Pilot 30C, but Navigraph is a better tools. And Navigraph have more charts to use, and yeah, it's just much more, what do you call it, better, I think. So you can see here, if you want to see Rustler 1, we can pull out the chart here and you can see the chart. Okay, so here the chart, and you can pin the chart, and so you can overlay the charts into the route. So you can see from the chart onto the planning, it is there. You can see from the chart many options, like when you can show this one, right? But the chart can be also overlay into the flight plan. So that is the good stuff of Navigraph. Of course, you have to pay versus here it is free, and you can just use it once you get FS2020. Okay, it's been quite a long video, but there's a lot of information to digest, so I hope you have better information about the IFR. I'm not a pilot, by the way. I'm not an expert in IFR. I'm just learning myself, doing this IFR by myself, reading, watching YouTube, whatever. But I think now I have perhaps several ideas, and this is also for me to document my knowledge, because sometimes I forget after sometimes if I don't fly frequently. After sometimes you just don't remember again what you learn, and you have to quickly relearn everything. Okay, so that's it. Hopefully it's useful. So see you next time.